Okay, there we go. Thank you. So with no further ado, sorry for the delay, everybody, but thank you everybody for hopping on. Welcome to the first ever official public Progressive Democrats of Howard County meeting. They are, of course, virtual right now in our pandemic world, and it will be this way for the near future, which has some pros and some cons. The pros is that it makes it easier for everybody to get on. Cons are we don't get to see everybody in person and form those connections. But with no further ado, thank you for everybody for hopping on, and we can go ahead and get started. We've got a pretty packed meeting, so I'll try to go as quick as possible. We have a panel on pandemic relief efforts featuring 4 organizations that I will introduce a little bit later on. We have a presentation from our International Solidarity Committee, and we also have some updates from our no developer donation campaign pledge and some other things that the club's been working on. So if we could go to the next slide here, get these introductions out of the way. Yeah, so unfortunately, we don't have time to really go in depth on each executive board member, but in case people are not familiar, my name is Jake Burdett. I born and raised here in Howard County, 23 years old, recent college graduate. I'm the president of the club. You can see all of our Twitter accounts for those who have them on here. Got the vice president, Megan Berganza, secretary Karen Emery, who's on vacation right now, treasurer Huri Hodgu, who has a HOA meeting right now, executive board member Kiana Folk, who's got a cool German Shepherd picture with the smoking a cigar. And
next dog, yeah.
Yes, at-large members Nick Smith and Kat Yui. So meet the team. Hopefully we can do an in-person event soon and meet everybody more formally. But okay, if we could move on to the next slide, please. Yeah, I'm gonna have to rush through these because some of our panelists have to be gone by 8. So I wanted to start the panel at 7:15, but the technical difficulties made it take a little bit longer. So sorry if I'm just breezing through these slides, but those who don't already follow us on our social media, I encourage you to do so. We have a website up at the top, HoCo-progressive.com. You can email us. We have Facebook page, Facebook group, Twitter, Instagram. We even have a podcast and a YouTube channel. You just type in Progressive Democrats of Howard County on YouTube. You should find our channel. It's got, I think we have 4 podcast episodes so far. So definitely check them out. We'll have more in the future. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so just because, we're not going to do this every meeting, but just because this is our first meeting, I feel like we should do it. Just tell everybody a little bit about who we are and why we exist. So I've copied and pasted our purpose statement into the PowerPoint, and it reads, "It is the goal of the Progressive Democrats of Howard County to promote progressive principles and policy, educate the community, and advocate for a government that represents the public good by building a people-powered movement. In this effort, the PDHC is committed to advocating for compassion-based policies that benefit all members of the community and transparent leaders who are accountable to the people, not to profit-driven special interest groups." Before I explain that a little bit more, can read. We've got a lot of mission statements in our bylaws, and I just selected a couple to put on here to give people good understanding of what we're all about. So some of our missions: to hold elected officials accountable for their legislative votes, statements, legislative actions, and policy positions; to ensure that land use and zoning policy works towards the collective benefit of those in Howard County; to endorse principled progressive candidates; and to educate the public on policy issues. So as all of this sort of summarizes, what we're all about is standing up for progressive policies and candidates in our local community And not only that, but being unafraid to hold particularly Democrats who fail to live up to these standards accountable. That's all to say we are not afraid to call people out. We are not afraid to name names. We're not afraid to name and shame. And in fact, I think sometimes that's what it takes to get change done. But in many ways, that sort of progressive group has been lacking in the county, at least when it comes to local issues. So we hope to sort of fill that vacuum, and also, as the bullets suggest, big emphasis, because it's local. A lot of the corrupting entities are developers that want to influence the zoning and land use policies of Howard County. So we really want to be laser focused, not solely on that issue, but largely on that issue, and also educate people. And if you want to know a little bit more of the background story and origin story of this club and how/why it started, I encourage folks to check out the very first episode of our Progressive Democrats of Howard County podcast. Again, you can find it on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. We explain pretty in depth the backstory with, some of the other Democratic clubs here in Howard County, and, some tensions that form between some of the more moderate branch of the Democratic Party and the progressives, particularly over the ICE battle that took place last year. So I definitely encourage people to check out that podcast episode for that added context. So yeah, that's kind of a summary of, what we're about, what we stand for. So if all of that stuff sounds good to you, definitely encourage people to consider staying involved with this group and becoming a paid member, which we will get into a little bit more about how to do that. So real quick, on to the next slide. And in fact, it does make sense to do these next couple of slides at the beginning of the meeting, but just because I know at least two of our panelists have to leave by 8, I wanted them to have at least 45 minutes. We're already past 7:15 when I started, so I'm actually going to move these next 2 or 3 slides. We're going to go over them after the panel, and we are going to jump ahead to the panel, which I'm guessing is probably a big reason of why a lot of people came tonight. So yeah, sorry to throw you for a loop there, Francis. Next slide. Yep, here we go.
Howard County's next executive has joined the meeting via telephone.
Yes, thank you. I think that's Harry Dunbar, judging by the way that he introduced himself. It had to be Harry Dunbar, or it's Calvin Ball really feeling cocky, or Alan Kittleman feeling cocky. But yes, thank you for joining
Harry
us.
Dunbar.
Yes, thank you for joining us, Mr. Dunbar, our former interim vice president, in fact. But because he's a candidate, he's not allowed to be on the executive board. But okay, so with no further ado, now the panelists get to present or talk on the panel in front of the next county executive of the county. So no pressure there. But yeah, so as the slide suggests, this panel is the topic of pandemic relief aid, pandemic relief efforts, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very broad topic, but this pandemic is affecting people in a lot of broad ways. So it kind of makes sense. And there's a lot of ways that people and organizations can help in different ways when it comes to pandemic relief. So we've got a pretty good medley here for you. We've got Henry Widener of Stompout Slumlords, which is a tenants organizing project of the Metro DC DSA, Democratic Socialists of America. And I'm going to let each of these panelists, in a couple minutes explain, give kind of a summary of what their organization does. So we also have Deborah Young from the Maryland Poor People's Campaign. She's the co-lead of the Central Maryland sector of Maryland Poor People's Campaign, which I believe Central Maryland makes up both Anne Arundel County and Howard County. and they've been active, and she's going to tell us a little bit about that. We're also joined by Prince George's County Young Democrats president and current Laurel at-large city council candidate, Martin Mitchell, who is being very generous with his time, not only because his sons have karate practice at 8 tonight, but also because he has an election on November 2nd. You know, his city election is like next week. So we really appreciate him being on here tonight with us. And the last, but certainly not least, Roxana Segovia-Beltran, the head of a local Howard County organization that started during COVID called Harvest Unite, that does a lot of gardening and food growing stuff. And all four of these people are about to tell us, you know, about their projects, their organizations, what they do. If you want to touch on, you know, if your group formed during the pandemic, how that factored into it, or if your group has changed the way that they've operated under the pandemic, you're free to get into that too. But Henry, do we want to start with you?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name's Henry. So yeah, I work with a group called Stompout Slumlords. I'll tell just a little bit of my personal story, and then, you know, how SOS fit into that and kind of what's been going on. So at the beginning of the pandemic, obviously, I live in Chilham, Maryland, by the way. So, you know, a lot of my neighbors were, you know, they work restaurant jobs or painting or, you know, hotels. And, you know, once the pandemic started, it was very clear that a lot of people were very scared and that like evictions would happen at some point because nobody was working. I had the fortune to be working from home. But anyway, I sent a letter to the leasing office right when Governor Hogan put out the eviction moratorium. And I sent the, you know, just emailed them and said, hey, I think you should really let tenants know about this. And you can guess what their response was. Nothing. They didn't say anything. And so I kind of, you know, was nervous, but I thought, okay, well, maybe they'll, you know, maybe they'll take care of this. Fast forward a couple months later, and I walk outside on one rainy September day, and one of my neighbors, all of their belongings were out on the front lawn. And clearly they didn't leave, you know, willingly. They were evicted. So that kind of made me realize that if we didn't do something as a community, then the evictions would keep happening. So I got in touch with Stompout Slumlords, and they started, you know, basically training me. They came help me canvas my building, and I started having like kind of deep training and one-on-ones with one of the lead organizers there. And you know, we got a petition together first. We did some protests, and then eventually we went on about a 3-month rent strike. Those of us who were paying, you know, about 16, 20 of us who were paying because we could, decided to join the 75 other people who couldn't pay because they didn't have any money. And we withheld our rent for 3 months. By the end of that, we called it off because everyone got paid out and no one was evicted. So we figured, you know, it was a great success for us. And to this day, there hasn't been a single eviction ever since we got organized. So, you know, basically what SOS does is goes to buildings, canvasses, identifies, you know, leaders, right? The people at the building who are like ready to fight, ready to talk to other neighbors and build power at the building. And SOS will give them support in terms of training, talking them through the very difficult task of having deep one-on-ones with people and basically building power right that way. I can say very proudly that I've seen that here. Before, you know, I've talked to tenants here who are thousands of dollars in debt to their family members and friends because they were too scared to not pay rent. Now they're not anymore. In October, a whole bunch of letters went out to tenants that were in arrears saying, oh, if you don't pay up in 10 days, we're going to take you to court. Something along those lines. And, I noticed a huge difference that I was immensely proud of. And that was that the tenants that I spoke to about this, I asked them, why do you think that the landlord is doing this? And every single one of them said, because they're trying to scare us. And I asked them, well, what are you going to do about it? And they said, we're going to go to the office tomorrow and talk to the landlord because we don't have the money to pay for this. And they figured it out on their own. They feel more powerful and less scared of the landlord because of the collective action, the organizing that we've done at the building level here. And I'm just immensely, immensely proud of that. So that's kind of what SOS is doing. There's, that kind of training. There's about 30 buildings, I want to say, in the DMV that are, associated with SOS, getting training from SOS. And we're expanding all the time. So got a couple more buildings here in Maryland that we're working on that I'm helping, spread the good word to. And, I honestly wanted to participate too, just to hear what's going on in Howard County. So I'm going to shut up, let other people talk. And I would love to hear kind of the issues that are going on with tenants in Howard County. But that's all I got to say.
Yeah, no, thank you, Henry. And I've definitely got some follow-ups because I know you all are doing big things out there that we could probably learn a lot from. So next, do we want to go to Deborah Young with the Maryland Poor People's Campaign?
Sure. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Deborah Young, and I'm with the Maryland Poor People's Campaign. I want to thank Jake for reaching out to me, and thank the organization for having me here to represent the Maryland Poor People's Campaign. So I'm going to start similarly to how Henry did, which is to share just kind of a little bit how I got involved with the Poor People's Campaign. And so it was during the pandemic, it was last June, that the Poor People's Campaign had a huge virtual meeting, if you will. And I listened in on it. It was several hours long. And Reverend Dr. Barber and Reverend Liz and others were speaking and talking about how in this country we have roughly 140 million poor and low wealth individuals, and who they don't have a voice. And you see them not having a voice in policies. And they talked about what they call the 5 interlocking injustices, which includes systemic racism, it includes militarism, it includes poverty and inequality. And so hearing this, it really resonated with me that this is an area that I want to work in and to become a part of. And so that sparked my interest in learning more about it and becoming involved. And so that's what I did. And in doing so, I've been able to, I've now been, I'm the co-lead of the Central Region for the Maryland Poor People's Campaign. And so the way we are structured is that we take some of our guidance and direction, if you will, from the larger Poor People's Campaign from Reverend Barber. So you may have actually even seen today that we had a more action in DC today. And the purpose of that more action was to bring voice of poor and low wealth people so that the decision makers in Congress, as they're looking at Biden's Build Back Better initiative and bill, that it wouldn't get watered down. And so part of the pandemic relief is that during this time period, many people of poor and low wealth, they have really been impacted by the pandemic. They've been impacted in terms of health, in terms of losing jobs. The gentleman, Mr. Widener, spoke about evictions. And so all of these issues kind of came to a head with the pandemic. It's not that we didn't know about these issues, but they just kind of came to a head, and they really came to a head for poor and low wealth individuals. So in Maryland, we have been trying to advocate for policies at the state level. Here in Maryland, what we've done of late is we're the central region. We're a newer region within the Maryland Poor People's Campaign, and so we are building right now. And so one of our first activities this summer was that we partnered with Luminous, and we went, and there were several of us, and we wanted to make sure that we passed out information to residents in rental communities and at bus stops about the resources that are available to them, because at that time it was getting close to the moratorium ending. And so we knew that evictions would increase once the moratorium ended. So we wanted to make sure that citizens in Howard County were aware of the resources that were available to them. So we passed out roughly about 1,500 pieces of literature to residents of Howard County. And then the other activity that we did was on September 11th, we actually went to several laundromats in Howard and Anne Arundel County, because the central region does include Howard and Anne Arundel counties. And we partnered up, and we basically wanted to get an understanding of, from the people that have been impacted by this pandemic, what are their concerns, what are their issues, so that we can come together and address those issues in an advocacy policy type of way. So part of the Poor People's Campaign is that we are a movement. We don't consider ourselves an organization. We consider ourselves a nonpartisan movement, that we're trying to fuse various parts of societies together in order to move this nation in a moral way. And so that's why it's called a national call for moral revival. And I thank you for having me this evening.
Yes, thank you, Debbie. I know you said you're kind of newer to this stuff, but you would not guess it by how confident you sound presenting all that. So thank you.
Thank you.
We've got some more questions later on for Maryland Poor People's Campaign, but
Okay.
next, do we want to go to the only candidate on the panel, and the Prince George's County Young Democrats president, Martin Mitchell?
Yes. How you doing, Jake? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for the invite tonight. And of course, I look to join you and continue working with you guys in the fight for progressivism. Of course, I commonly say being a progressive is an ambiguous term. And I say that because, of course, sometimes being a progressive changes hands based on who exactly is saying it, right? Like, some people say they're progressive on a single issue, and they're quote unquote now progressive. And of course, in anybody who is really been in it a while knows that it's not just one issue that makes you truly progressive or people oriented. It's continued actions and stances, and sometimes making stances that are not popular, and a lot of times I commonly would say not sexy. Of course, I guess I should start with the introduction, right? So I'm also the president of the Prince George's County Young Dems. And, you know, we do a lot of work in Prince George's County, but also we partner with organizations around the state, especially around Central Maryland and Southern Maryland. And a lot of the work that we've, of course, done during the pandemic has been food distribution. So we participated in tons and tons of food distribution. And of course, we look to continue helping support the community. And one of the things we're working on now is our annual toy drive to the homeless shelter for Christmas. So I appreciate, you know, all of the organizations. Of course, I'm familiar with Poor People's Campaign. I'm becoming more familiar now with the Stompout Slumlords. But I of course appreciate all the efforts. And like Jake said, I'm running for city council in my hometown of Laurel, and we're looking to do some great things. So check out Martin for Laurel campaign when you get an opportunity. Real grassroots. You know, we knocked every door in the city. You know, we don't essentially believe in mailers, but you know, we had to send one. But we believe in knocking doors. We believe in meeting people where they are, and you know, I look forward to continue to work, and I look forward to the rest of the panel. Jake, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. And yeah, as he said, he is a candidate. His election is actually less than a week away. It's this upcoming Tuesday, November 2nd. Part of Laurel is in Howard County, not the part he's running in, but I know me, I think maybe Kat and some others are planning on going down to Laurel on November 2nd to help campaign for Martin, help get him in there. So if anybody wants a ride, you know, message me, message Kat. Maybe I'm also going to help Mayor Colin Bird of Greenbelt that day, who just about 30 minutes before this meeting, Martin got Mayor Bird's endorsement. So congratulations on that. And I've got some other questions in a bit. But last but not least, again, Roxana, do you want to share about, you know, what Harvest Unite is, what they do? And I know that Harvest Unite did start during the pandemic. So, you know, feel free to share that story as well.
Yes. So thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. I'm really honored to be on the panel with so many amazing people. So Harvest Unite did start during the pandemic, right at the beginning. It was around April, when very tumultuous time because everybody was so scared. But when you looked outside, the weather was beautiful and we were just arriving in spring. And the first thing I thought about was how much I wanted to grow food. I've been a gardener for 10 years. I've also been a bit of a community organizer and children starting the pandemic. So I'm a bit of an educator as well. So I wanted to find a way to combine that and find really community resilience through food growth and being able to support the environment at the same time. So I'm a permaculture designer. Those that are not interested or not aware of the term, permaculture is essentially the study of being adapted to the flow of Mother Nature. So understanding how to do, how to grow, how to move in a way that is with Mother Nature and not against it, as so many things are these days, especially our food growing system, as you understand how monocultures and work and how it really degrades the environment. Oh, is my audio a little jumpy? I'm so sorry about that if you cannot hear me. Does it help if I speak louder?
Yeah, it's better now. It hasn't cut
Okay.
out for a little bit.
I usually have my earphones, but I have no idea where they are. And so essentially, the way that we started is that I do hydroponics, and my husband and I came up with this gardening system. We called it the Hydro Garden Kit. And essentially it was like a 32-ounce container that we converted into hydroponic growing systems, and we propagated plants. And we collected about 250 of them from the environment, from, you know, the community. And then we changed them around and we gave them back. And we were essentially trying to teach people that don't really have the opportunity of space to be able to grow in small spaces. From there, we also started a communal gardens program where we gave out seeds. We gave out about 250 plants that we got from nurseries. And just know that this was, you know, privately funded just for my family, but everything that we got was from the community in terms of gifts. And we really endorse the gift economy, where essentially we receive and we just give back, right? Not really like monetary stuff involved, because sometimes that's just more messy. And so we've done workshops on, well, if you understand our mission statement, it's to empower communities to thrive, grow nourishing food, and live sustainably. So we've done sustainable art workshops. We've done workshops on environmental trivia, supporting the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, just inviting community members to come in and understand like global systems of waste are understood and what, you know, our country could do to change that. Oh goodness, I mean, it's been a little bit of a whirlwind, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, that's essentially Harvest Unite. Future plans is that, you know, I know over here it says I'm like the head, but I'm really trying not to be a head anymore. I'm trying to be more of a cooperative member. So we're looking to become a cooperative and to continue to spread through the community, right? We want to go to communities. We want to ask what people need. We want to talk about what are their food needs and what are their environmental needs and how can we combine that to support people. So great. We have a website, harvestunite.org. So you're welcome to go on there, and we're on social media stuff as well, so you can follow us. So yeah.
Thank you for that, Roxana. And I guess the first follow-up question, I feel bad because we might only get to ask like 1 to 3 of them, especially if I want to give the audience a chance to ask questions. But this is, I guess, directed more towards both Henry and Debbie. And, you know, maybe you can go first, Henry, because basically what I want you both to speak on is, Henry, you told me a very interesting story when I asked you to be on the panel of you told me what Stompout Slumlords' original approach to organizing was, and then, you know, how that went, and then you all switched to another model, a more of a labor organizing model. So if you could, I guess, briefly tell that story and tell, you know, the difference of your organizing results between using the first method and the second method. And then I want to hear from Debbie, as somebody who Maryland Poor People's Campaign, from my understanding, uses that same labor-based model of organizing, which is the one-to-ones, the relational organizing thing. And Debbie, I know you said that stuff is all very new to you and you're still learning, but if both of you could, I guess, share a little bit about those organizing models and your experience with it so far, because I think it's definitely something that we should probably try to replicate here in Howard County.
Okay. Yeah, so before, SOS has been around since 2017. That's long before I got involved. So, but what I've heard is that at first, and there's a lot of reports I can link to some, SOS does like, I think at least annual reports. And, you know, at first it was just an anti-eviction campaign kind of. They would search the, you know, court dockets for people who were, you know, had court dates, as is true in DC, and I'm sure it's true everywhere. If you don't show up to eviction court, the judge will rule against you by default, right? So sorry, my cats are here fighting for some reason. So, you know, they wanted to, the idea was basically, let's overload the court system, because if everyone shows up to their court date, there's no way they'll be able to get through all those, you know, all those hearings. That didn't work. And I think, you know, SOS started to change through, you know, basically organizer trainings with labor unions, right? With a particular friend who has like a long experience with labor unions. And SOS started to really focus on like one-on-ones, you know, kind of the model of one-on-ones of agitating people, you know, building a plan together, and, you know, and so forth. And so ever since then, you know, it's grown exponentially, I'd say. You know, and at the beginning of the pandemic is when it really, really took off for obvious reasons. But, you know, we've focused more on this, on building relationships, building trust with tenants, and especially tenants who show a willingness to knock doors, who know people in the buildings, that can move others. Yeah, you know, I mean, I think the reason it worked is because, or the reason it's working is because it's really, really, really hard for a tenant to want to stand up to their landlord. A lot of people are extremely scared. I'm scared. My landlord called me yesterday for some reason. It was actually like I don't think she meant to call me, but I called back and I was shaking. You know what I mean? I was so nervous because I know that my landlord has more power than me. You know, they have millions of dollars. I have, you know, on a good day, hundreds of dollars. So, you know, to help push people through that fear, to help people really believe that it's worth fighting, it takes a lot of work, a lot of one-on-ones and stuff. So that's kind of the big focus nowadays, right? Is to build plans with people, help them push through that fear, and get them to know that collective action can actually help them, you know, with their problems. So that's it.
Well, thank you, Henry, for that. And Debbie, yeah, now you as somebody who has tried to move towards that model a little bit more recently, what has that shift been like for you, and what do you think of the, you know, one-to-one and relational organizing model so far?
That is definitely an approach that we use in the Poor People's Campaign. But in addition to the one-on-ones, and like I mentioned, our most recent activity for the Central Region was going out to the laundromats and meeting people and engaging with them, using that one-on-one relational type of a model. But another part of our organizing is what we kind of refer to as fusion, which is partnering with like-minded organizations, partnering with for like-minded causes as well. So it's a combination of both. In the Central Region, we are really focusing on right now building the base, so that when it comes to policies, and there's a need for testimony, we're able to engage those individuals, and so that they can see that they have a voice to make a difference in their lives. And so it's a combination. I must admit, I'm learning how to do the one-on-ones. There are definitely some folks that are in the Maryland Poor People's Campaign and that are in our Central Region who are very good at that activity. But one of the things that we're doing in Maryland also is that because there are a lot of us who are new or newer to this type of work, they're also providing training for us, so that when we do go out and have conversations, that we can become more comfortable in those conversations that we're having with people, and that we're making that connection with them and understanding their needs, but also linking arms with them to bring them into the movement.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing your experience with that, Debbie. Okay, well, I want to ask a question to Martin. Martin, we've been talking a lot about, you know, what organizations, or as Poor People's Campaign calls it, movements, you know, what they are doing or what they can do. And I know, you know, as you said, Prince George's Young Democrats has already done a lot on that front. But I'm curious, as a candidate and hopefully a soon to be elected official, what can local governments do at a time right now for their citizens? Because the thing that's so shameful is that no offense to Maryland Poor People's Campaign or Stompout Slumlords, but in a perfect world, your organizations or movements would not even have to exist. The only reason that they exist is because they're here to solve problems that the government has failed to properly address. And so it's, fallen on, organizations and individuals to band together on their own to do so. So Martin, what can / will you do, and what can local government do to help people during these times?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I know that the first thing that I would say is the city of Laurel, we're going to receive, or we started receiving parts of it, 21.4 million from the rescue plan. So my thought is a good portion of that money should be spent on, rental relief, homeowner relief, because the thought is the problem will become exacerbated. It's not as if things are just going to change overnight. So I do believe that a good portion of that money should be earmarked specifically for that. And I know that the city has had a renter relief program in the past, but obviously it wasn't built for a situation that we're going through today. So yeah, I would say on that front. And other than that, I mean, of course, we need to continue to think about ways to address homelessness, and not just put the Band-Aid on it, shelter approach. So of course that's something that I'm going to advocate for in the city.
Well, thank you, Martin. And I want to ask something to Roxana, because I would say Harvest Unite is probably maybe the most like bottom up grassroots organization. Stompout Slumlords is obviously very bottom up grassroots too, but and Poor People's Campaign, but they're just bigger with larger memberships and have been around for a bit longer. But a lot of people think that to help or to assist people that you need a whole lot of money and a whole lot of resources to do so. And that is sometimes the case, and it certainly helps, but that's also not the case, and sometimes we all have the resources to sort of help ourselves a little bit. So Roxana, could you talk a little bit about ways that people can organize or be sustaining and self-sufficient on a relatively low budget? Because I know a lot of the things that you teach people to do with Harvest Unite doesn't require a whole lot of money for people to make.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point. One of the permaculture principles is to turn your problems into solutions. And I feel like that's kind of what we did, right? I think like one example is that like there's all this trash everywhere, but trash at one point was something useful, right? But then we just threw it away. So when we looked for our resources, we literally looked in the trash. We looked for like what was thrown away, what people like no longer wanted to see worth in, and you kind of find worth in everything. Another example is, plants can be very expensive, but plants can also be propagated, which means you just put a little herb stick, stem in water and the roots grow. So we were able to get donations and then propagate all those plants, and essentially like those little, and if you go to harvestunite.org, you can see what they look like, those little growing systems. Each one costs $1. And that was just for the label, was the most expensive thing, just because I wanted to be fancy with the label. But essentially you can make them for nothing. And I think like in all examples, like we kind of just have to look beyond monetary means, right? And see like, what do we physically have? And we are a very rich country and we have so much just kind of lying around being thrown away. So I think just look beyond what you see in front of you, I guess.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of times people have maybe the resources to make stuff or do things on their own, but not the know-how. So I definitely encourage people to attend some of these Harvest Unite workshops. You know, if I could figure out how to do it, and I definitely do not have a green thumb, you know, I think probably anybody could do it if they attend these workshops. So definitely be on the lookout for more of those activities from Harvest Unite. But I know some of our panelists had a hard stop time of 8 and we're getting there. So I want to open up the floor from the audience if any audience members had a question, either just to the panelists in general or to a specific panelist or organization. Now is that opportunity to do so. Going once, going twice.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, hey Joy.
Hi. I don't have a question. I just wanted to just add commentary. I think these are all great organizations. I had no idea that these existed. I thought that Stompout Slumlords was something that just started during the pandemic, but I actually looked it up and see that they've been around for a while. For the Maryland Poor People's Campaign, I know about the Poor People's Campaign from, you know, Martin Luther King Jr. and Reverend Barber and his Moral Mondays, and he partnered with Roland Martin, and they were actually having it on his show every single week. So it's great to know that it's local. I do have a question. What made you guys go into the laundromat? Where did that idea come from? And when you went into the laundromat, what was that conversation like?
Thanks, Joy. That's a great question. So we initially, actually, when we were planning this outreach activity, we initially wanted to go to one of the, oh goodness, must admit the other part I meant to ask is that I'm actually fairly new to Maryland as well. So in Howard County, it's called, oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank on what it's called. But they throughout all of Howard County, there are different areas, and I'm drawing a blank on what they're called at the moment. But at any rate, we wanted to go. I'm sorry.
Districts?
No, it's not. It's not districts. But they're kind of like different parts of the county, and they have like a recreation area and.
Village centers, maybe?
Villages, thank you. Villages, thank you. We initially wanted to go to one of the villages to do our outreach. And as we were planning, we learned that we needed to go through the process of getting permits and approvals, and we really didn't have the time to do that. And so one of the villages that we spoke with, they actually gave us the idea. We told them what we were trying to do, and they gave us the idea of, why don't you try a laundromat? So several people from the team, they searched out laundromats in both Howard and Anne Arundel counties. And we identified 6 laundromats, 3 in each of the counties, that we would go and canvas. And so one thing that was interesting when we did the one-on-one canvassing, some people were willing to talk to us, which happens, and some people were not. That was more the case, that they more were not. But those that were, we had very good conversations with them. And so one of the outreaches of the outcomes of the outreach is that we reached out to those individuals to have more conversation with them about the Poor People's Campaign, and how they could get involved in the Poor People's Campaign as much or as little as they want. Some didn't want to, and that was okay too. But for example, I'm not sure if you all are aware, but there's actually legislation that's going to be brought forth in Howard County to raise the minimum wage to $16 an hour. And so one of the things that we're starting to do is to reach out to some of those folks that we met a couple of months ago, especially those who had expressed a concern around wages, which was most of them, to let them know that this legislation is coming up, and they're looking for folks for testimony and to find out if they would be available and to provide them with the information should they be available, should they want to do a testimony for this legislation.
Well, thank you for that, Debbie. And yeah, I think Progressive Democrats of Howard County is most likely going to end up testifying in support of that bill, or potentially even recommending that they go farther with it, because $16 an hour in the third wealthiest county in the country, even that is definitely not a living wage still. But it's good to hear that Poor People's Campaign really is getting involved locally with stuff like that. But
Yes.
Harry, it looks like you have a question. And Debbie and Martin, if you both have to go right now, that's understood. You both said you had to go at 8, so I won't.
I probably have about another 5 minutes that I can hang in.
Cool.
Yes, I'll be heading out, but thank you guys.
Yep. Take care, Martin. Thank you. Good luck.
Of course, thank you.
Yep. All right. Yeah, Harry, I hope your question wasn't for Martin.
No, it's actually for Roxana, but thanks to all the panelists. I have a question for Roxana. You mentioned that in your introduction that mostly it's your group does not deal with the monetary, rather deals with gifts. But when it comes to assistance from the county, did you seek and or receive assistance from the county? Given the vast amount of need in the county for during the pandemic. I know there are a lot of food giveaways that take place. So there is definitely a need. So just wanted to know, what kind of assistance whether you sought it and or received it.
Okay. No, so we didn't receive any support from the county, or everything was community funded, I will say. It kind of was like our focus that I think logistically there are a lot of like organizations, and I really wanted to fill a need rather than kind of just jump to like what other people were doing. And our focus was more on teaching people how to grow food on their own rather than just kind of like giving the food, which technically we did, right? Because we did give like tomato plants and I mean, I think just because like we were just kind of put together so quick, it felt like an extra chore, and really it was a lot easier to just reach out to community people and be like, hey, can you donate containers, or can you donate seeds? And people were really helpful and really willing to just kind of give things rather than money, and we were just able to kind of revolve that back with volunteer help, and that's how we did it.
Yeah, grassroots. It sounds like. I know you had at one point, what Marlena said. At one point, I know Harvest Unite was, flirting with the idea of potentially trying to join with Community Ecology Institute, but I know that never ended up happening. But the thing about that county money is, yes, it's nice, yes, it's helpful, but sometimes it comes with strings attached. So there's definitely pros and cons to weigh if you're in that position.
Good point. Yeah, we didn't really want any strings.
I don't blame you. Yeah, okay. Well, is there any other last questions for the panelists before I guess I give a chance to the panelists to like give a closing statement, and then we can finish with the rest of the meeting?
Actually, Henry, I had a question for you. How did you how do you choose like what buildings to talk to people in, and do people reach out to you, or how did you do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something we actually assess all the time as we try to grow. So there's a lot of different ways it's happened. Columbia Heights has been probably, it's a neighborhood in DC, has been one of our biggest sort of hubs of organizing. And it's just because, one building was really amped up. They went on rent strike almost immediately, like when the pandemic hit. And then, they were connected, their sister lives over in this building, or a friend was over here that would come to these protests and realize, were actions and say, oh, I want to do that here. So, then it would spread that way. That's one way that it's happened. Sometimes, especially now, we've gone back to looking up, what's on the eviction dockets and knocking doors, specifically, at those buildings where evictions will be taking place. And, a lot of it just has to do with capacity. I mean, in an ideal world, we'd have enough time to organize every single building. But, if we see that tenants are ready to fight, and there are some if we find some sort of natural connections in the building, like I said, people that can move other people, we will put a lot of energy into those buildings. And, sometimes it has been the case where we've tried to get buildings started and it just, wasn't really working out. That it was just hard to, we'd go over there for a lot of canvases and no one was really, really wanting to take it on as the big, it takes up every single second of my life outside of work is dedicated to this, so it takes a lot, and understandably, not everyone has that time, or it's just, not going to happen. So there have been times where we've tried buildings and just seen that, there was maybe another place that could use our efforts a little more, because there's only so much time in the day and in the week. So that's one way, through the eviction canvassing. And people do reach out also. There's a process called Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, which is something that's unique to DC, which means that when your landlord wants to sell a building, a property, the tenants have the right of first refusal. They have to form a tenant association in order to do that. Some buildings, I think about 3 or 4 SOS buildings are in that process right now as we speak. They had been organized before, and when the opportunity came up, they decided, hey, let's actually give it a shot to buy this building, or at least change our landlord. And through that, some other people have reached out that live in DC. They're like, oh, actually, we're interested in buying our building. We want to reach out and see how we do this. And they've gotten in touch with us for that too.
Yes. Well, thank you for that insight, Henry. I would love to see us build capacity to start doing these sorts of things. We are about to start doing some outreach stuff in general, though not quite that level yet. Yeah, well, again, unless anybody has something super pressing, I think we can call that a panel. But thank you so much to Henry, Debbie, Roxana, to Martin, who's no longer here.
Are we able to give parting words?
I don't mean to cut you all off. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Well, this is something I've been reflecting on a lot. And it's the thing that's stopped me from doing this years ago, is that it's really, really, really hard to have a one-on-one with someone. It's the most difficult thing about this, is to sit down and talk to someone and try to build a plan. listen to their fears. I've heard really harrowing stories. And I think part of what has, what is hard about it for me is that I feel like the responsibility to have an answer when I come into a conversation with someone. And I've realized that that's not the case. I don't need to have an answer. I need to feel what they're feeling, empathize with them, and build a plan with them. It's not my job, and it's not our job as organizers at Stompout Slumlords to go there and tell people what to do, tell people what the solution is. We're trying to build it with them. It takes a lot of emotional, energy. It takes a lot of emotional awareness that I'm, having to work on constantly. But like, if that's what's kept you, people here, like, from organizing, like, it's also what keeps me from organizing, every day when I think, God, I don't have an answer for this, or what happens if they say this. But that's not the point. The point is like listening to people and saying, look, like, we can fight this together. What are we going to do about it? So just, if you're scared, it is scary, but this is the fight of my life. So, join if you want.
Absolutely. And I can speak from firsthand experience. One-to-ones absolutely work. I did them a lot when I was organizing with college Democrats at Salisbury University. And that's how I grew it to be the largest college Dems chapter in the state. But then I graduated and I came back to Howard County and I fell out of the habit of doing one-to-ones. And, I have seen my, I could call it my organizing efforts, but I'll more call it my ability to build a base, I guess. I've definitely seen that suffer since I stopped doing one-to-one. So I've personally been trying to get back into this motion of doing so. And my first one-to-one, when somebody did a one-to-one to me, personally, I felt like it made me feel like important, and it made me feel like a part of something. And it made me think, wow, somebody actually like wants to sit down and hear me out and like find out what I have to think about things. And that was I'll never forget that feeling. So yes. But moving on. So Debbie, did you have any closing words you wanted to gift us with? And you live in Howard County, so I hope I'll reach out to you about a one-to-one event.
Yeah, I do. No, I just really wanted to just thank you for the opportunity. These are some awesome organizations that are part of this panel. And I just really wanted to just thank you for the opportunity. And I look forward to partnering in the near future with all of these organizations as we build our base, and as we, in the Poor People's Campaign, we say, forward together, not one step back.
Forward together, not one step.
Not one step back. Yes.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. Okay, and
bye-bye. I do need to drop off now, but thank you so much.
Thank you for staying well past 8.
Bye-bye.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just say a quick thank you because I know that this meeting has a lot of other things to happen. I know, Jake, you're always so awesome at all the work that you do. So thank you for inviting me to be here. And Henry, it's great to see you again. Henry and I knew each other from even before all this. So I'm glad to still be connected. And yeah, I would love to just, continue to organize and get to know each other and build community. So, and if anybody wants seeds, do contact us. We have a lot of seeds, so we will give them out. We have milkweed and natives and everything you can imagine. So we want to give them to you.
Yes, look them up on Facebook, join their Slack. Yeah, and Roxana is actually how I met Henry, so she's not lying about that. Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much to all of our panelists. If you all want to go do something else with your night, I would not blame you at all. But I appreciate the time. So I will try to speed through the last remaining parts of this slideshow. Try to get us done before 8:30 if possible. So I think we might actually have to go back some slides instead of forward because we had skipped ahead. So helpful things to know about the club. So just message me forward, and we will put this on our website and post this on social media because I don't think we've done it yet. But today is the 4th Wednesday of the month. The meeting started at 7 p.m. and that is when we are going to have our regular monthly meeting times, 4th Wednesdays of the month, 7 p.m. I probably should have looked up what that would be in November so I could put it on the slide and promote it now, but I didn't do that. So, you know, you could look it up yourself or we will publicize very shortly. If you want to join our email list, you can sign up easily on HoCoProgressives.com. Just scroll down to the bottom of the page. If you want to pay dues and become not just somebody who can attend the meetings, but somebody who can actually vote when we have important club votes like we're going to have in a little bit on, you know, our first official club vote, I guess. So if you want to pay dues, it's $36 a year for an individual. You have an option to pay $3 a month if you want. You can also get a $50 membership that covers you and one other Howard County resident. If you're a little bit short on money, completely understandable. We actually have an option for a dues waiver every 3 to 6 months if you request it and if you need it. You do not have to be a registered Democrat to join this club. Yeah, as I said, non-members cannot vote, but they can attend. So we also have a community outreach committee, which we're getting off the ground, International Solidarity Committee, which we're going to hear from later, and also a candidate committee, you know, if possible, get some good progressive candidates running for offices in the community. So if anybody's interested in joining any of these panels, you know, feel free to say something in the chat or so I know to reach out to you or message me/us personally about it. Okay, and we can go on to the next slide. Thank you. Yeah, so you saw the dues amounts, $36 for an individual, $50 for you and one other person. To pay the dues, you can pay on Venmo at Progressive HoCo, though. Is Ruth Housewhite still here? Yeah, she's here. Ruth, were you able to get that to work before the meeting, or is it still giving you trouble?
No, I was not able to get it to work.
Okay, sorry about that. Well, I'll look into what that's all about and either work with you to do that, or there's also an option to mail either check or cash for dues amounts, but to our PO box. But yeah, I don't blame people for.
Isn't it illegal to mail cash?
Okay, I'll take out. I didn't know that, but I'll take out cash.
Okay.
Okay, good to know. Learn something every day. Good call, Joy. Good call. Okay, so yeah, unfortunately, we didn't prepare a treasurer's report because I didn't think Harry was able. We thought that we were going to do the slide at the beginning of the meeting, and he wasn't going to be able to be there for that. We still need to transfer new signatories onto the bank account from our last officer, so we can update next month about where exactly we are with the finances because I would like to know myself. But okay, next slide, please. So yeah, so the way that we do to become a new member in this club is it's a two-step process. Not only do you have to pay the dues, but then you also have to be voted in by the existing members. So it's like a two-step process, though it does not specify which step has to come first, whether you get voted in or whether you pay dues. So that's a little bit flexible there. The charter members, which is like the original batch of members, that was the people who, and this is defined in our bylaws, that was the people who showed up to the September meeting, you know, where we voted on officers officially and also paid dues by that meeting. So I have all of their names listed there, as well as people who paid dues or attempted at least to pay dues after the charter meeting. And, you know, again, even if they've already paid dues, they still have to be voted in now. So that there's 4 people that have either paid dues or attempted to pay dues that I'm aware of since that last meeting. So I want to go ahead and propose, you know, that we vote them to officially become members, although Ruth will still need to pay her dues even after getting voted in to officially become a member. But Ying, Chuck, and Jenny have already paid their dues. So So yeah, Ying, Maddie's, Chuck Thomas, Ginny Thomas, and Ruth Alice White. I will make a motion in support of voting to allow all of these new people to become members. Are there any seconds?
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? Going once, going twice. Okay, all in favor say yay.
Yeah.
All opposed say nay. Okay, well, there we have it. Congratulations to Ying. And the bylaws, I believe, don't say anything about requiring that they be at the meeting when they get voted in. It just says that they have to be, voted in at the meeting. Congrats to Ying, Chuck, and Ginny, though I'm not sure if any of them are still on. And Dr. Wu, I'm glad you hopped back on because I've actually got a news piece related to you, something that you wrote. So I'll get to that in just a second. But Ruth, you will become a member the second that we can figure out how to pay dues. So I'm sorry about that, and I'll work with you on getting that done. And is there anybody here, because I haven't been able to log into our Venmo or check our PO box, so in theory somebody could have actually paid dues and I'm not aware of it. So is there anybody here that has paid dues that was not on this list that we should vote in right now, or can we move on? Okay, all right, sounds good. Well, those who are not members and have not paid dues, if you've liked what you've seen so far, I encourage people to pay the dues and become a voting member. But okay, we can move on. I think the next slide might be the panel. We can pass that, yeah. All right, committee updates. So as I said, we've got an International Solidarity Committee, Outreach Committee, and also I'll throw this out there. We could definitely be more organized with our social media. We don't post as much as I would probably like us to see us post, and that's because we haven't structured it out of how to run the social media and divided the labor and whatnot. So if anybody here happens to be good with social media and wouldn't mind helping with something like that, feel free to say so in the chat. But the main committee that I want to go to right now is our International Solidarity Committee. I think that's next in the PowerPoint. Yeah, okay. So the International Solidarity Committee, and I feel bad because I tried to edit the PowerPoint slide, but I guess it had already been shared, so it on screen share, so it's not showing up. But we actually do have an event tomorrow about this that I tried to put the flyer in there for, but I will promote it later, and I'm sure Rick can talk a little bit about this. But he's going to present to us about ongoing upcoming elections in Nicaragua and the US's sanction regime against them.
Thank you. I put into the chat a couple of times a link to the meeting tomorrow night, the town hall that we're hosting. It's several organizations, including our organization, and Jake will be emceeing. So, which I think was a very good move because Jake is really good at coordinating these things, I think. So what we're going to be talking about are these new sanctions that are being applied to Nicaragua. Currently, the US, in terms of Latin America, there are very stringent sanctions against Cuba and Venezuela. And in Venezuela, initially, they caused thousands of deaths from them not being able to get food and medicine and so forth. And now they want to add Nicaragua to the list. And the reason they say is because well, in some places they say Ortega controls all of the newspapers, and then other places they actually print stories from the newspapers he supposedly controls, and they call him dictator. They say he tortures everybody. None of these things have ever been substantiated. The US press picks up this. They basically just lie. And if you can imagine, you may have noticed that they lie about poor people. In this country, they lie, they want us to be afraid. they, if there's a crime, in a poor neighborhood, they have to show it to you. And same in Nicaragua, if there's some sort of crime occurs in Nicaragua, it's like news in the United States, where if that crime occurred anywhere else, it wouldn't be noticed. In fact, their crime rate is extremely low. So it takes them a while to even find anything to report on, but they want you to be afraid. They want to create this impression, and it's completely inaccurate. I want to ask the question, most of the immigrants, as we all know, they're coming from Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador. Why is there no net migration from Nicaragua? You think about that. The US government manipulated the elections in each of those three countries, and the US-backed candidates won. And well, actually not in Honduras. The US-backed candidate didn't win, but they then orchestrated a coup, so they got the US-backed candidate into power. So when we get our guys in power, the conditions become so bad, people leave, but they aren't leaving from Nicaragua, even though we've been trying to overthrow the government. The US is ratcheting up these sanctions. So they have this Renaissance Act. It's passed the Senate by voice vote, no debate. It's currently pending in the House, and it would put very severe sanctions on the country, and they would affect food and medicine. Basically, they're going to completely try to shut down the government, and it's a socialist country. So the medicine comes from the government. They produce their own food in the country. They're 90% food self-sufficient, but they'll still need the equipment that is necessary to produce the food. So it will ultimately affect people. And these are the toughest sanctions since the 1980s. But really, history is repeating itself. There is this concept of ethnocentrism, or looking at the world from your own point of view. It's also called American exceptionalism, the idea that our country is so perfect, so great, so wonderful, our democracy is so good that every other country really needs to have exactly what we have. And we should go in, overthrow their governments, and put a system in place that's like ours, as if every country in the world wants a two-party system where both parties are controlled by the same oligarchs. And that is what is behind what's happening in Nicaragua. So they want to overthrow the government because the government is very popular, and the government has implemented, some programs, housing programs. And, basically there, instead of public housing, they actually build them houses, and then they own the houses. They have implemented, they have school lunch programs. They actually made school free. You had to pay to go to public school under the US-backed neoliberal government. They've have gender equity, about, very, very similar gender equity in the country, 5th in the world after Iceland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, I believe, and then it's Nicaragua. And 50%, more than 50% of the police, more than 50% of the doctors, 48% of the parliament, more than, I think, 58% of the ministers in the government are women. Okay, so they've made a lot of changes, and poverty was reduced by half. Illiteracy was reduced. They built 24 hospitals. So they've done a lot of things, and the US wants to overthrow this government, even though they're very popular. Polls show them trending at about 60%. And so that one of the points against Nicaragua is, look, they're so popular, it must be they're cheating. Well, think about it. If we had a political party in our country that did the things that a majority of people wanted, don't you think they would win by a landslide? Half the people in our country don't vote, and a lot of people have to really scratch their head and say, are these two parties different? They don't have to think about that. They know that they're different. So of course, the party that the US wants out is going to win the election, and it's not because they're cheating. They don't need to cheat. And so the US had put in power. So it wanted to help Nicaragua the first time in 1860. An American privateer named William Walker invaded Nicaragua with a mercenary army, declared himself president, and to make it more like our American democracy, he legalized slavery because slavery was legal. So, the presumption, I'm sure, in those days was that, well, this is so much better, they must be so thankful. And they killed him a few years later. But still, the land was controlled by a few wealthy people and US companies to export fruit. And so they needed, and they also thought they might make a canal across Nicaragua because they have navigable rivers across the entire country. So they thought, well, maybe a good canal. We didn't have the Panama Canal yet. So they wanted this. So in 1909, they invaded, they occupied Nicaragua till 1933. And a guy named Sandino started a rebel group. He basically got rid of the Marines, he kicked them out, but they killed him. They put a dictator in place, Somoza. And for 45 years, the Somoza family ruled Nicaragua with an iron fist, became very rich, owned about 30% of the arable land. And so the Sandinistas, people named for Sandino, overthrew him and gave the land away to the poor and implemented programs. But immediately, as soon as they came to power, the US started a war against them, funding terrorist groups, organizing the former army of the former dictator to overthrow that government, funding them, giving them air support, bombing, and an economic embargo. So they went through 16 years of neoliberal governments. Poverty went up. They got some industrialization. They cut down a lot of trees, exported them, but didn't really replant. It didn't help the people of Nicaragua, who are all worse off. So they voted in the Sandinistas again, and the Sandinistas have won re-election more easily each time. And since those days, in 2007, when they took office, things have actually improved for most people, according to what most people would say. So the US in 2018, seeing that they were not going to be able to overthrow them through any sort of election manipulation unless they had some violence occurring, funded riots, which the government now has basically, they pardoned everybody from that, but a lot of people started to move the funding toward trying to fund riots again during the election. And so the government has arrested some people who were involved in that the second time. High profile people, some of them, but not candidates. None of them were candidates. According to the US press, Ortega's arresting everybody that was going to run against him. No, none of them were going to run against him. There was one party that was disqualified out of 16 parties. It was disqualified because the head of the party was a US citizen. So you think about it, of course, why wouldn't they want a political party? Why wouldn't they want a president that's a US citizen? I mean, doesn't everybody want exactly what we have? So, really it's a racism that is behind what we're doing. It's this idea that a poor country, a country with natives, with Native Americans, indigenous people, a lot of Afro-Indigenous people, and darker skinned people, as well as white people, that a country like this, they can't possibly rule themselves. They must want us to help them, give them a new government. So they're putting on these sanctions. And even if you don't like the government, and some people don't, even if you don't like it, the idea that you're going to save them with sanctions by making everybody starve so that they will elect a better government, in your opinion, it just isn't right. So that's why we're doing this seminar. And as you see, I saw the link. If anybody has any questions, we can, depending on what time there is, see if I have another link on Sunday. If you're interested in the elections, there's another webinar just on the elections. And I'll put that in the chat as well. So please come. And, a lot of the same issues that we were talking about earlier, I actually went there to study agroecology, which is a really interesting issue in Nicaragua. It's at least 5 more dimensions than American agroecology, whereas, I've been studying environmental impacts of agriculture for a while in the US, and it seems like everything is about how do you fit into the capitalist system? So how do you make protecting the environment more profitable? And in Nicaragua, it's so many things. It's social, it's economic, it's religious, moral, as well as environmental and scientific. So there it is. So I have a question. What will be the length of my talk? I am about done tonight, if that's what you meant.
I have a question.
Yeah. Tomorrow it will be 90 minutes, I think. Yes, okay.
I've done missionary work in South America, Guyana. I know that America was involved in their election as well. We put our noses and stuff. But what is the reason why we are so hungry for Nicaragua? What is our interest? What's the real deal?
It's a really good question. When Reagan was really obsessed with Nicaragua, he had about 50 wars going on, proxy wars that he was funding and sanctions and so forth. But Nicaragua was his favorite one. And, it really was hard to figure out why it was so important to him. It's a very poor country. Certainly, it's no threat to the United States. Some people say it's the example that you have basically social democracy working, or democratic socialism working. And they don't want that example for other countries to look at and want to emulate themselves. So that is probably part of it. Part of it is just momentum, I think. It seems like we have a system in the CIA, USAID, these human rights groups, which are basically formed by the CIA, some of them, or by the British intelligence, in case of Amnesty International. They're all telling this story because they have an objective, but they forget that there is, a truth, because the whole point is it's propaganda. And I think they have what they call blowback. They don't even know for, in some cases, what they're supporting. So there are a lot of different reasons, but it's a good question. It's one I think about a lot. And because you think if you could know the reasons, you could change it, but it's really baffling when you come right down to it.
Yeah, as a general rule, if there's somewhat of a leftist government in power elsewhere in the world, they're probably not going to let the US companies just come in and take all their resources, and US politicians can't allow that now, can they? So I don't know if that's exactly with Nicaragua, but
yeah, you're right. I mean, I'm not sure. Well, we know Cargill, which Cargill has been doing great in Nicaragua. They cornered the market on these poultry processing plants. They're doing really well, but they right before the 2018 riots, they decided that the government was going to raise taxes on them for Social Security too much, and so they joined in trying to overthrow the government. Cargill is a big U.S. agribusiness. Guatemala was United Fruit, which became part of General Foods. We know Bolivia was overthrown just recently, and Elon Musk, thanked the U.S. government personally and publicly because he wanted the lithium, which they gave to him for a short time until it got taken back again when the coup got reversed. So yeah, a lot of time it's a company or more than one company, but Nicaragua, the strategic interest, a lot of it was this canal for a long time. Some of it's just momentum. I think that was why we were initially interested, and maybe they aren't even sure why they are anymore.
Yeah. Oh, Joy, were you going to say something?
Yeah, because I've done missionary work in the British Virgin Islands, and even in the British Virgin Islands, they won't allow any of the American companies. So they're number one in the world, I think, for like yachting or something like that, or at least on the Western Hemisphere. And Gucci wanted to come in, KFC, and they're like, they won't allow it. Even the banks, it has to be a local bank. You're not going to set up a branch of BOA, for instance, B of A or something like that. So what is the nitty gritty? What is it that we want from Nicaragua?
Yeah, it's hard to say, but so part of the problem is that U.S. is still Nicaragua's number one trading partner after all this, but they'll trade with anybody because they want trade. So they are dependent, because of that. And I can see why a country would say we don't want these connections, because once those connections are broken, then there wouldn't be as much of an incentive to overthrow their government and to control things. There's also a problem of what's called decapitalization, where companies, take the resources of the country and remove them, but don't really pay for them, or don't really pay enough that the money can get incorporated into the economy. It just goes to a couple of wealthy people. So the money is basically, the resources are leaving, but the capital leaves because the owners don't actually even live in the country. So the money isn't spent there and it just dries up the economy.
And we've been trying to, do this to Nicaragua, I think for literal decades since.
Well, centuries, 1860, I would say was the beginning, but certainly since 1909, whenever a government is in power that the US doesn't like, they replace them. And they like some really nasty dictators. The Somoza up there with Pinochet, he had his own lions that he fed his political opponents to. They still have the cages, which they show people. I mean, he was a bad dude. And of course, the Catholic Church hierarchy always liked Somoza, always backed him. And the US government and many companies in Nicaragua thought he was fine.
Yeah, but so I don't know exactly why, pinpointing why they're doing it to Nicaragua, but I can say for sure it's not because of human rights and it's not to uphold democracy, despite maybe that's what them publicly claiming. But I think we are going to move on, and I promise I'm going to try to wrap this up very quickly. But Rick has been, I believe, taking student groups to Nicaragua for years on trips, and I think is even going to be traveling to Nicaragua to basically watch the elections happen this next week. So maybe we'll have a podcast episode where he breaks down what he saw there in the future. But
yeah, maybe I'll report on Sunday live, because that's when the election is.
Oh, okay.
A week from Sunday.
Yes. Well, wish you luck with that. Thank you for your presentation and for following this issue for so long. But okay, well, I promise I'm going to really try to speed things up here, get us definitely out before 9. So I might even have to skip around here a little bit to different slides. So I think we should probably promote the outreach committee events and the just general upcoming events. So you might have to slide a little search around to find the appropriate slides. I'm sorry, Francis, to send you on this. Okay, yep. We were there before. The outreach committee events. There's just 2 of them. Yep, there we go. Okay, so in terms of, basically, we've to some degree reached a ceiling of the people that we're going to reach using like social media promotion to get our club out there and, sharing it to all the usual politicos. So we're really going to have to start branching out to people who aren't already super involved in local politics and in the community to the degree that everybody else on this call is. So, to that effect, we want to actually start meeting people where they're at, going to public places, whether it be a library, laundromat, grocery store, shopping center, public park, whatever. But we want to go there and talk to people in the community, introduce ourselves and our group, what we're about, some of the initiatives that we're working on, try to get their contact information so we can follow up. Basically, this is how we meet those people to do the one-to-ones with that Henry from Stompout Slumlords was talking about. Of you meet the people, you make the initial connection, sit down for a one-to-one with them, build that relationship, find out what their interests are, and based off that, proposition them to get involved in some way. So these outreach committee events are absolutely going to be crucial for that. And so we have those outreach, networking, recruitment events, as well as just some social events, and we have one of each of those. So this Sunday, actually, and I have to throw up the Facebook event and get everything ready for this, we are going to table at Miller Library in Ellicott City from 1 to 5. In case we don't end up getting permits to table there, we're still going to meet there from 1 to 5, and instead of table, we're just going to go knock doors in the surrounding community, which is funny because it's on Halloween and we're basically like trick-or-treating hours before, except not about candy, about something even more fun, politics. So I hope people can join us for that. We're going to send, probably another email and Facebook event about this, and then also more of a social event, especially for people who are on this call who have people that aren't as engaged as you and we are, but is like-minded definitely send this event their way, encourage them to come talk to us, because, you know, sometimes those more fun, non-formal, just meet and greet conversation things are better at drawing people in than these, you know, long 2-hour meetings, although I promise, hopefully these won't all be 2 hours. But we have a social event the Sunday after that, November 7th from 12 to 2 at Union Jackson, Columbia. Little pre-game, pre-Ravens game meet and greet, and maybe we'll even stay afterwards and watch some
You know
of it.
what? The owners of Union Jack doesn't sound like it.
What, he's not a progressive, you're saying?
Very much far from it. I think he's rumored to even have been at the insurrection.
Really? Okay. Well, we will definitely keep that in mind and probably choose a different place to hold future outreach or social events. I had no idea about that, but thank you for telling me that, Joy. I guess I should say I'm not shocked. Union. Well, I mean, it has union in the name. You would think that they would be, you know, supportive of union. I guess not. Me and my assumptions. But yeah, thank you for that intel, though, Joy. This will probably be our last time we do anything there. But okay, so real quick, we'll do just we got another slide with more general events. We'll do that, and then we'll close out with Dr. Wu's you know, big revelation that he had in the community that he stayed on for, and I feel bad.
You scared me, Jake.
You said what?
You scared me. What?
Good. This is good. Well, actually, it's not on the slide right now because I put it on the slide while we were, you know, while the meeting was happening, and it didn't update when they screen share. But basically, what I was going to share before I even realized that you were going to be on the meeting, and now it's great that you are on, is, and as I said, or you might not have been on at this part, but a big part of our focus is zoning and land use, local zoning and land use, and sort of developer corruption stuff. And you really have been a really great watchdog on the Board of Education to sort of, you know, show the community some of these sneaky little tricks that are going on. And you recently kind of uncovered what I would consider to be a bombshell that I would like you to explain a little bit about, if you can. And that was how the county, I guess, for years has been misreporting or underreporting, you know, the student yields of new developments, and basically underreporting, the increase to student population that had on the school. So if you want to explain, I guess, you know, what that little trick that you discussed.
Sure, Jake. Thanks for the invitation. I think I learned so much stuff from your meeting. It's pretty interesting. And I really appreciate Dr. Cohn, his focus on the Nicaraguan. I think it's a very interesting case. And I registered for the meeting tomorrow. I see what's happening. So I think the reason for the housing development, right? And how does that housing development can match with the growth and the funding needs for the school system. People pay attention now, there's always a mismatch and it's a lag in there. And then there's a formula to really, we call APFO, which guide the housing development. And they ask for like how many units for any housing, right? How many students any housing unit can generate. So the county uses something called new development yield, right? So the new development yield they're using right now, they're just focused on first year. And then people say, that doesn't match with the reality because we always get an overcrowded school and we never catch it up. So what's happening there? For the last more than 10 years, the county uses just new housing yield, right, which only focus on the first year. And then they're not considering the accumulated impact. So for accumulated impact, in general, every house generates 0.4 students over the years, right? But if they only use the first year yield, they are only generate 0.02, something like that, right? So there's a big mismatch there. And I think that's one reason our funding needs just couldn't catch up with the student growth. And we have huge maintenance effort, which deferred by $400 million. And we're not able to catch up, get the funding from the county because the county has so many needs. And then the growth, every year we have more than around 1,000 new students. So for each new student, it costs $50,000 to just provide a student seat, right? So think about that. Each year, how many more funding we need to construct new schools, right? So I think the problem I've been shared with the county council, I said, how about just using average student yield, whether new home or old home, right? Just use 0.4, just use an average. And that's more aligned with the reality we're seeing. You don't need to use that new development housing yield to control or manage the growth, right? If you use the other number, the average number, that's more aligned with the reality. That probably helps the school system and helps the county as well. Otherwise, every year we're crying for more money, and you said, oh, I don't have the money, and we're not pay the teacher enough, and we're not providing enough support for students who are in need, right? It's a constant battle between the funding need and the funding shortage for the county. And in terms of the long-term impact, it's pretty dire, let's say that. We are really short of funding to provide sufficient support for our students.
Yeah, and thank you for, sharing that and, raising the alarm on it, because yeah, I mean, what they were doing, I personally, you don't have to say this, Dr. Wu, but I'll say this because I think it's true. I don't think this was just a simple error on the county's part. I think that this was they were being intentionally misleading with the statistic basically the incentive is make it seem like new student growth at schools doesn't come primarily from building new houses. It comes from resales of existing houses. And this is a talking point that local bloggers would parrot, for years to justify new development, saying, oh, it's barely even adds any new students anyways. Look at the studies, look at these numbers. And I knew for like a year something was wrong with the numbers, and now we know.
So here, one example, right? We built a lot of new schools in Eastern Howard County, right? As long as they open, the school is over capacity. Think about that, right? So we project some students for the new development, and that doesn't match reality. If we using the number we given to the county is using, we need to wait for maybe several years to fill the whole school, right? But as long as school opens, it's overcrowded. Think about that, right? Just the reality doesn't match the theory or the number the county is using.
Yeah, here, you have something to add?
Yeah, it's really baffling the extent to which this particular report was underreported, because, it's not even mentioned, it's not even acknowledged by a lot of county officials, and it's a huge issue. The fact that they have been underreporting the impact of new residential development it's worth discussing every day from now until they finally update the general plan. Fundamentally, the county and a lot of there's a major groupthink in the county that residential development pays for itself. There's this, it's just a lot of hand waving argument is employed, and so we need to fundamentally alter or change that that thought process. And the argument is not because residential development does not pay for itself, don't build it. It's make sure you have the right assumptions that residential development does not pay for itself. Given that assumption, make sure you account for the impact correctly, so that we are planning better, we're planning accordingly, and we're not, it's like selling selling your goods in bulk at a loss, expecting to make up for it by selling a lot of it. So that's what the county has been doing for years, at least 20 years. So changing that thought process, and so this particular report requires a lot more a lot more attention than has been given.
Yeah, and thank you again for highlighting that, Dr. Wu. And it seems like we, as a club and with other organizations, community members, need to continue to highlight that until it is adequately addressed. Because here he talks about development paying for itself, but if we're not even estimating the right number of like people that the new developments is going to increase, that directly throws off our calculation of what the cost to pay for itself would be in the first place. So yeah, so okay, well, last things I want to go promote these last couple events. So yeah, the no sanctions on Nicaragua town hall tomorrow. I already talked about our outreach committee event at Miller Library this Sunday. On November 4th and November 17th, both at 7 p.m. and on Zoom. This is related to what Dr. Wu was talking about. We are teaming up with some other organizations in the county, including Indivisible Howard County, Chinese American Parent Association of Howard County, Our Revolution Howard County, and some others to host a webinar on APFO, Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance, teaching people what it is, breaking it down, why people should care. And it's basically, regulations that say you can't build any more new developments in this area unless the infrastructure is below a certain capacity. That would be my summary of it, but they will go over it much more in depth at both of those webinars. I encourage people to attend. So those are all the events. Now I said I'll get us out before 9 p.m. So let's take this vote real quick. This is only relevant to dues paying members because those are the only people who are able to vote at our first ever club vote. Webinar presented by Brent Lovelace from PTAC. I don't know if he's still with PTAC, but he knows his stuff when it comes to APFO. And thank you, Huri, for helping set this up. So this last vote, Francis, we can maybe go to the Christiana Rigby slide. Here we are. All right. So on this topic of, sort of developer corruption and developer pay to play influence through their developer donations. Of course, this dynamic exists with all industries, not just developers, but locally at Howard County. That's the main culprit here. So that's who we focus a lot of our attention on. Luckily, there's been a lot of talk about this Citizens Election Fund, which basically provides matching public donations for small dollar donations for candidates who vow to swear off taking big money, taking PAC money, taking corporate money, anything like that. But sadly, there is a massive gaping loophole that Christiana Rigby, the District 3 council member, who is a Democrat, but takes corporate money. She is, again, the Citizens Election Fund is supposed to be for people who don't take corporate money or impermissible contributions, as the fund calls it. Rigby, though, has taken thousands of dollars of said impermissible contributions, not just last election cycle, but this election cycle, this 4-year election cycle, which the rules of the CEF say, if you've taken those impermissible contributions this 4-year election cycle, you're not supposed to be eligible for participation. Yet she's taken thousands of dollars of these impermissible contributions and is trying to use a loophole saying, oh, well, I created a new campaign finance committee that I'm going to use for CEF. And I didn't take the impermissible contributions in this one. I took them in the last one, even though the CEF rules still ban that. And it was still during this election cycle. So whether it was taken in one committee or another, it still influenced her. She was still able to spend and, raise and spend unlimited amounts of money of that. So it's still a problem, still a conflict of interest. And, me, Huri, Megan, Joel Hurwitz, we worked on drafting up a complaint. The complaint already is drafted and basically, it's been edited and ready to submit essentially. And I'm signing it as an individual, which is required in the complaint process. But we were hoping maybe we could get an organization to back the complaint as well, so that we can put the organization logo on it. The people at the board of elections at the State Board of Elections, who, you know, will ultimately rule on the complaint, may take the complaint more seriously if we have an organization signing it. So because I didn't want to share this publicly, I don't want Christiana Rigby to see it before it gets filed, and we were planning to live stream this. I don't have the complaint up. It's also like 6 pages, so it would be hard to put up all in one slide. But you know, I've already emailed the complaint earlier today to only members, because those are the only people who can vote on it. So I would like to raise a motion to vote in support of having, you know, PDHC put their letterhead on the complaint and, you know, officially back the complaint, if there are any seconds to the motion. Going once. Going
Second.
second. Okay, we have a second.
I mean, you had several people prepare the complaint, correct? So
Yeah, okay, that could count as a second. Okay, so
more of a committee suggestion.
okay,
Well,
good. All right, so
I have a question about it though. I thought that the whatever the organization that you would be complaining to has already like addressed this in some way and said that it was okay. What's the?
they have not. They have not. There was so basically it's complicated in that there are 2 entities that have some jurisdiction over it, and that is the County Citizens Election Fund Commission. But they can really only give their opinion. You know, the way it's supposed to work is you officially submit a complaint. The Citizens Election Fund calls a meeting, calls in the person that the complaint's about. You know, this is all under oath. They're welcome to have a lawyer with them. They can call in the complainer. They don't have to call in the complainer to this meeting, but they can. And you know, then they you know, give their ruling or whatever, but no official complaint has actually been submitted yet, so they have not even had the chance to do that. But even if they do that and they do rule and say, hey, we think that she's allowed to do this according to the rules, there is an even higher entity that has there is an even higher entity who has even, you know, more of a final say, and that is the State Board of Elections, the Candidacy and Campaign Finance Division. They have ultimate say, so they actually have the power to disagree with the county commission. And in fact, we are even planning on, because we don't know what the county commission is going to say, so we were planning on potentially submitting multiple complaints and basing like a second complaint off the feedback that we get from the first one. But you know, and that was, you know, we had language in the complaint originally basically questioning the credibility of the county commission, because the county commission was appointed by county council members and the county executive that is not participating in the CEF. So it's, I would say, a political and biased process, whereas the State Board of Elections would be much more biased. We ended up taking that out of the original complaint and said we can consider using that for like a second complaint down the road, depending on what the commission says the first time. But long story short, there have been people that have complained on like blogs and comment sections, but nobody has actually done the formal channel that it needs to go through to give the State Board of Elections the actual opportunity to do it. And I think this is also just as much to convince the public as it is to convince the, you know, those formal bodies, because even if they rule, oh, this is completely okay, you know, Joel Hurwitz's big point is, well, then that should show, if they're saying this is okay, clearly there's a giant, massive, gaping loophole that needs to be amended. Whereas I'm trying to argue the loophole doesn't even exist and she's just outright cheating. But either way, I think, you know, there would be a benefit to an organization calling, you know, pointing a finger to the, what I think is a huge flaw. So yeah, that was the rationale, I suppose. So if there's any other discussion, Megan, were you going to say something?
No, I was just gonna say, when we vote, we can just put it in the chat.
Yeah, okay, good call. All right, so I'll give it, one last opportunity for further discussion. Going once, going twice.
Well, actually, just one quick note. I just want to point out from my personal point of view that disagreeing with Christiana on this issue or various other issues where we disagree with her does not mean that we can't also agree with her on issues where we do agree. I mean, there's issues where we agree with Calvin Ball. There's issues oddly where we even agree with Alan Kittleman or whoever else, and there are many issues where we disagree.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, unless there's like, really strong objection to it from the club members, I think we probably will, end up testifying in support of, Christiana Rigby and Opal Jones's living wage bill. So yeah, no, good. We should not throw the baby out with the bathwater. I agree. And we should work with people where there's agreement. Okay, so again, give another opportunity if everyone wants to say anything before we raise it for the yays and nays. So going once, going twice. Okay, and yeah, you could just type it in the chat. All in support of submitting the complaint on behalf of PDHC, say yay. Okay, all opposed say nay in the chat. Going once, going twice. Okay, it looks like the yays have it. So I am so sorry to everybody for keeping you on for over 2 hours of your Wednesday night. It's the first meeting. Give a guy a break. But I will try to make sure that meetings are not nearly this long in the future, and we don't have to worry about all that beginning stuff as the first meeting. So thank you, everybody. Unless there are final comments, we can motion to adjourn. I motion to adjourn.
No, you can't, but I do, because you're chairing. Someone second?
I'll second.
And
You don't have to discuss it.
All right, all in favor, yay. Yeah, yay. Okay, all right. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good first meeting, Jake.